Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother asarimhotep with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And this is the Mbongi. And I am going to do my presentation from the One Africa Power in Unity conference that was held in Detroit, Michigan on Saturday, May the 30th and April the 30th and Sunday, May the 1st. And so we'll get into the details of that in just a moment when we return. Welcome. Again, this is your brother Asar. And as always, normally when I attend conferences and I do a presentation, I usually, do the presentation over online. So those that did not have a chance to either attend the conference or see the live stream will at least have an idea of what I presented at that particular conference. So in that tradition, I am going to be doing the presentation that I did at the One Africa Power and Unity Conference that was held in Detroit, Michigan on Saturday, April the 30th and Sunday, May the 1st. And so you probably heard me, advertise the conference for a number of weeks and also explain the circumstances that shifted the conference location from Aswan, Egypt to Detroit, Michigan, which I won't get into tonight. But all in all, the conference went well and went smooth, at least it looked smooth. From my standpoint, it was very engaging. I got to meet a lot of people and network. And so some of those people whom I've met, I will actually have on the program. And so stay tuned for that. But I'm doing something a little exclusive again for our Patreon members. And I just want to thank you all for being Patreon members and your support, which helps to keep the channel and other endeavors going. And so without further ado, I am going to share my screen. And we'll do the entire screen this time. I'll make this full screen and then we go bam here. And then we go to the slideshow and then boom, right there. And so again, this is my presentation and the title is Linguistics, a Tool for Ancestral Memory Recovery and an Instrument of Intellectual Warfare. Now, many of you who, of course, are familiar with me and have heard some of my lectures or read some of the books that I have recently produced, some of this information is going to be kind of repetitive. But again, given the nature of the conference, many have not heard this information. So, it is new to them. And I try to add a little bit on it to make it fresh, somewhat fresh for those who are familiar, in fact, with my work. But the title of the lecture today was slightly modified as a result of the shenanigans of the Arabized Russian bots and the moving of the conference from Aswan to Detroit. And so I added in here an instrument of intellectual warfare, because we are at war. So there's an intellectual warfare, and there's people who are waging war on us for having the audacity to speak our own cultural truths and to present our information and scholarship on the world stage. And so the purpose of this lecture is to show you how linguistics can, in fact, be used in making uh, important arguments in terms of the Africanness of the ancient Egyptian civilization, its culture, philosophy, worldview, etc. And so, of course, if you are familiar with me, you know that this is one of my primary tools. But the aim here is just to kind of introduce this to the public and to show you how I do the work. And so, I mentioned the Arabized Russian bots, and what I did for the lecture is to kind of personify the group into Thanos. And so you should be familiar with Thanos from the Marvel Comics and, of course, the Marvel Comics films in regarding the Avengers. And so the reason why I attach Thanos with the Arabized Russian bots, and remember that the Arabized Russian bots are the so-called Egyptian nationalists who created these fake accounts, under the Arabic script, and was trolling the scholars who were to present uh, at the conference in Aswan. And just like the Russian bots during the presidential campaigns here in the United States, they were spreading a lot of misinformation to try to steer the presidential election into a particular space for whatever their own agenda was. And so it is similar with the Egyptian Arabized Russian bots who were spreading misinformation about what we do, what our intent was for going to Egypt, and exactly what our talking points were. And so now, for the sake of conversation, they're being personified as Thanos from the Avengers. And it becomes important, this particular connection, because we're familiar with if you're familiar with the film, you know that he is one of the major villains who went through a lot of trials and tribulations to get all, I believe it's 5 or so of the Infinity Stones, or 6 of the Infinity Stones. And once he got all that power, his objective was to wipe out half of all life in the universe, and uh, to kind of reprogram or reset the universe so that the resources allegedly could be managed well, and that life. But he came to realize that his goals would forever be halted because there were people who remembered the old ways. And he says this explicitly. For example, in the Endgame Avengers film, he says, "You could not live with your own failure." Now he's speaking to the Avengers. "And where did that bring you? Back to me. I thought by eliminating half of life, the other half would thrive. But you've shown me that's impossible. And as long as there are those that remember what was, there will always be those that are unable to accept what can be. They will resist." He continues, "I'm thankful because now I know what I must do. I will shred this universe to its last atom. And then, when the stones that you've collected for me create a new one, teeming with life, but knows not what it has lost, but only what it has been given, a grateful universe." Captain America says something to him, something to the nature of, "You'll never get away with it," or they'll fight. It's like, they'll never know it because you won't be alive to tell them. And so when you put all of this together, again, he realized that the memory of the world before and how it was provides motivation for them to fight and to reestablish order in the ways of old. right? And so, the humans and the Avengers, they are of the position that if things is going to change, it's going to change naturally, and by the agency of the people themselves. We're not going to be bullied into being slaves and subject to an oppressive future that you have laid for us. And when he realized, and I'm speaking about Thanos, when he realized this, he understood that he had to erase all memory. And this is exactly what the Arabized Russian bots and the Egyptian nationalists are trying to do. And so they don't want us in Egypt to have these discussions about the relationship between ancient Egypt and other African nations and groups, and the African character of ancient Egypt, because they are in the tradition of Islam, and Islam, one of its main goals is to erase all memory and erase all history, to make it seem like Islam has been here since the beginning, and they will have no memory of what's old, only what has been given to them in the form of Islam. So that's why the Arabized Russian bots is attached to this personification of Thanos and the goal of Islam and Arabism, and just the racism, nationalism of the mixed children or mixed descendants of the population who is now living in Egypt. And so we were warned of this just even for the study of Egyptology in regards by Sheikh Anta Diop, when he stated in his African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality, the birth of Egyptology was thus marked by the need to destroy the memory of a Negro Egypt at any cost and in all minds. And so this Thanos attitude has been going back to the birth of Egyptology itself. And we can see, even with Zahi Hawass, who was the former, head or chief of antiquities in Egypt. And there's an online video by a sister coming out of Nigeria from the group Arise News report. And there is a video titled "Were Ancient Egyptians Black?" And the sister went to Egypt, and in part of the greater conversation, she interviewed Zahi Hawass. And this is exactly what he said when confronted with that question. They, speaking about the Egyptians, were dark skinned, but they were not Negro. Because look at the lips of the Negroes like that, and the nose like this. It's not real. You cannot connect the Egyptian civilization with the African at all. It's different. So, here on one hand, you see that Sheikh Anta Diop says that they, trying to erase the memory of a Negro Egypt. And we can see an example of this, that they were dark skinned, but they were not Negroes. And look at the lips and look at the nose. You cannot connect the Egyptian civilization with the African at all. It's different. And so he says a lot in this piece. And there's some other stuff that he says that reinforces. So this is essentially the attitude of the trolls who started the campaign to remove us from the itinerary coming into Egypt. And so I want you to look at him and pay attention to his skin color and the like, and remember the argument that he made. He said, look at the lips and the nose. And it's interesting that when you actually go and see the primary documentations of what a face is in the Egyptian literature, that it is exactly the opposite of what he is talking about in that interview. And so you see exactly the wide nose, you see exactly the so-called stereotypical lips of the Negroes. And so this is why it's important to always go to primary documentation when we're having these discussions. But we want to move beyond the physical traits and not get caught up in a tit for tat in terms of biological phenotypic features, because that can lead us into a circular argument. So we always want to rest on the foundation of the culture and history, and the phenotype stuff would be just like a bonus in the conversation. And so, I introduced myself as a computer scientist, and as you should know, the branch that I belong to deals with the cognitive sciences, and which is an interdisciplinary scientific study of the mind and its processes. And so it also includes philosophy, psychology, linguistics, anthropology, and neuroscience. And all of these are combined to try to replicate consciousness, human thought, worldview, and all that into artificial intelligence and learning, and even quantum computing, which is kind of the next big thing, and neural networks and the like, studying from the brain. And so what I do is I try to combine a lot of this knowledge from these fields and bring it to historical comparative linguistics and Egyptology, and to see what the outcomes are. And so it allows me to fight against the memory loss that is intended by those who are anti-African and do not want to see us access these memories. And so, I've created the job title uh, of Ancestral Memory Recovery Specialist. And so, when I introduce myself, that's exactly what I say now. I'm an ancestral memory recovery specialist. And of course, just like when a plane crashes, there are a group of engineers that come together and they look and they salvage all of the pieces, and then they bring it into a hub like this, and they try to put the pieces, as much as the pieces, together so it can give us clues as to how the plane failed and what areas were hit. And they learn a lot of information in terms of flaws, in terms of design and the like, and they get to reconstruct the crime scene, so to speak. And in many ways it's similar to what I'm talking about in terms of of the ancestral memory recovery. And this is exactly what we do. But they take all of this information and they utilize it to, when they're designing new uh, planes or whatnot, they keep in mind the flaws of this, and they're able to reconstruct, knowing the dynamics of the plane, and the like. And so when they do that, they're able to construct new models that can take them into the future. And that's exactly what we do in terms of ancestral memory recovery. And so that requires the creation of teams. And I work with my team, the well, several teams and individuals who help to make this happen. And I make, of course, my contribution. And one of the things that we often talk about is this notion in Egyptology called Ma'ak Heru, which is the someone who is true of voice, or the vindicated. And another variation of the phrase or short is the Ma'ati, the righteous, the blessed, the vindicated. And this is important because the word vindication means to avenge. And as you can see on the screen, we'll hone in to the center. It comes from the Latin vindicare, to lay claim to assert, to claim for freedom, to set free, to protect, defend, and avenge. And so a variant of the vidicta means to revenge. And revenge and avenge is essentially the same thing, but there's a slight difference in nuance. To revenge is to enact punishment, and to avenge is to enact justice, right? So, I like to, as being an African-centered scholar, I like to use African terms as much as possible when communicating. So, in Chiluba Bantu, the word for to avenge is sombola. or you can say Sambuela. Lusumbo or Lusumbu is the word for revenge, and Musumwedi is a person that takes revenge or one who avenges, right? So I want you, you can see the picture of the Black Panther here, and as hopefully you're piecing together that I have an Avengers theme here. And so when the Arabized Russian bots and other Egyptologists uh, try to argue against an African and a Black Egypt, what they're essentially saying is that these foundational scholars who are now deceased are wrong, that their information has not stood up to scrutiny, which is false. And so who I have on the screen here is Martin Delaney, one of the first African Americans to read and write in Meta Nature and to make arguments for a Black Egypt. Then, of course, we know Shekhan Diop, Jacob Carruthers, and Alan Anselin, who more recently passed in regards to the other three. And so what we're saying is that these scholars are Ma'ati. They are the righteous, the blessed, and they are the vindicated. And their works and ideas have been vindicated because there have been the Basumwedi, the Avengers, to take on the foundational work and expand it and to bring clarity and to strengthen the essential arguments from these foundational scholars. And so these are just a few who I put into the Avengers. And so, and as I stated in the conference, you notice there's only one woman here. And so hopefully, these kinds of conversations will inspire more sisters to be a part of this fight in Egyptology and Africana studies. So part of the tools that I use is linguistics. And as I argue, linguistics is in fact belongs to the field of mathematics. And so, we have to ask, well, what is mathematics? How does linguistics equal mathematics? So we're going to go to Dr. Eugenia Chang, who is a mathematician and concert pianist. And she wrote a book, How to Bake Pie, an edible exploration of the mathematics of mathematics. And on page 10, she states, in math, the technique we use is logic. We only want to use sheer logical reasoning, not experiments, not physical evidence, not blind faith or hope or democracy or violence, just logic. So, what are the things we study? We study anything that obeys the rules of logic. And then she goes on to define on the same page what mathematics is. So, mathematics is the study of anything that obeys the rules of logic using the rules of logic. Noting that it's not about simply calculations, it's about logic. And we're going to show you, logic in just a moment. And so I extend that definition because we got to understand mathematics as a formal language. And so what I say is that ultimately it is a formal language that allows us to articulate the relationship between symbols and their ability to aid in the creation of models that allow us to better reason about reality. Because you're not, we create these symbols to account to represent something, and then we compare the symbols and we look at it logically to see what the relationship is, and then infer about reality based upon the relationship that we see as represented through the symbols. Mathematical symbols in terms of numbers or letters or language and the like is all the same. And so here is an initial examination. And so, as a mathematician, as a scientist, we want to look for patterns. And we want to look for patterns, enough patterns that that we are rest assured that it is not coincidence. And so the general rule is if we have a minimum of 3 examples, this allows for us to say that there is smoke. And so what the saying goes, where there's smoke, there is fire. And so we try to have these 3 examples. So our first 3 examples is including the Proto-Bantu reconstructions and the ancient Egyptian language. And we can see the correspondences in the third column on the right for the consonants that we are comparing. So let's just look at the first column. Notice that the consonants are bolded and the color is red. And so, while normally we will also consider the vowels, the ancient Egyptian did not write out their vowels, so we just don't know. But they left us the consonants, and that's more than enough for us to do a comparative study. So we can see in this first row, the edi, breast, teat, which corresponds to binti, nipples, breast, in the ancient Egyptian language. And so I have separated in both Proto-Bantu and in Egyptian by a dot morphemes or the grammatical morphemes that are attached to the word. So in the proto-reconstructions, we don't normally add the grammatical morphemes because they're unique for each language. But in the Egyptian, they provide us with the grammatical morphemes. So that's why you see the dot ty. It is for the dual. And so since there are 2 breasts or 2 nipples, that's why we have the dot ti or tj in this instance, standing for I or Y, representing the dual nature of the chest area, right? So we can see the same thing going on in the other 2 rows. And you see the commonality that where there's a B in the Proto-Bantu, there is a B in the ancient Egyptian. However, when you see there is a D symbol, there is an N in the Egyptian in the second consonant position. So on the right-hand side, you can see my correspondence as I'm mapping B to B, D to N in each one of these. And so I've shown here a pattern, right, that it allows for me to write this mathematical formula. I'm saying here that the Proto-Bantu consonant sequence BD implies Middle Egyptian BN, right? And so another way to say this logically is if Proto-Bantu BD, therefore Middle Egyptian BN. And so given that we have this pattern here, we can test it with one more example. So what do we predict for Proto-Bantu Bod, meaning to shine, right? So notice that we have the same consonant sequence again, BD. So if we have BD here and we're seeing this pattern in Egyptian, what do we expect to find for a word meaning to shine in the ancient Egyptian language? Well, if you guess BN, then you are correct. So our prediction is confirmed. In Egyptian, it's wabin. So we notice that there's a prefix now, but to the BN consonant sequence, meaning to shine. And so this is our string formula that we have here. And I've just written it in a different way. So hopefully you can see the correspondences in the way that I have it here in this third column here on the correspondence. So see, I have BBDN, and I have the same here. I just have it written vertically down for both. So notice that there's no consonant, no vowels in the Egyptian side, but there's an A, an A in the Proto-Bantu reconstruction. But notice that I have bolded and in purple the verbal prefix W for this would been to shine in the ancient Egyptian. And so, when we're doing this type of reconstruction, when we're doing this type of comparison, we don't only want to deal with the root of the words, we also want to deal with the grammar, the grammatical morphemes of the word. So since this provides us with a grammatical morpheme, the W prefix, let's see if this exists in Bantu. And so here's another word, wabin, to rise, in Egyptian on this top row here. And at the bottom, we have in the Chiluba Bantu language out of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mubandu. And I should say that when the D sound, the Proto-Bantu D became L in Chiluba Bantu. But when the L sound is nasalized, it becomes D again. So ind, right? So, and there are other examples that I can show that shows that Chiluba Bandu, or the ind, corresponds to the N in Egyptian. And so, but what we're focused on right now is the prefix. So we have here the W prefix in Egyptian and this initial correspondence to M or Mu in Chiluba Bantu. But remember that we're always looking for patterns. So we can't just go off of this one example. We need more examples. And so we need at least two others, but let's do three. And we can see this correspondence here. So we have the same formula as we did before. Chiluba Mu implies Middle Egyptian W. Why? Because we see here in this first column, Egyptian, where we have the W prefix, the corresponding word in Chiluba has Mu, both verbal and nominal prefixes. And while I don't have time or space to show you the sound correspondences that are in the red between Egyptian and Chiluba, please rest assured. And if you have Ujima Volume 2 and my towards a Chi-Com dictionary text, then you will see these correspondences in as far as the consonants. But right now we're focused only on the prefixes, and which is why in the correspondences column on you see the WM, WM, WM correspondence. So you can, pause the video and look at it carefully and confirm and see if, what I'm saying is true. And so the reason why this is important is because when we're able to make sound meaning correspondences and establish these patterns in both grammar and in basic vocabulary, it is impossible to argue from the standpoint of Zahi Hawass that there is no connection between ancient Egypt and, for example, the African civilizations in Central Africa. It's just impossible. If you could not make this up randomly and establish these patterns, it's virtually impossible. And so something else is going on. And what we argue, of course, is that the ancient Egyptian and the Bantu languages in Chiluba, for example, derive from the same ancestral culture, and they maintain these words in the daughter languages as they begin to separate and differentiate from dialects and then to established languages. So this is, how I use the tool to be able to establish the relationship. And so now we can start getting into some major and specific types of concepts that help us to better explain the ancient Egyptian through what we notice with the related languages and cultures that still maintain and have these ideas and practice these cultural things in their language. So we're going to stick to the Democratic Republic of Congo for the moment, but we're going to switch to the Congo people who speak Ki-Kongo. And so we are going to deal with this concept of Ma'at, which we know is defined as true justice, straightness, balance, and order, and a host of other things. And so when we start doing these sound meaning correspondences between Ki-Kongo and ancient Egyptian, we see the same type of patterns. And again, it would be impossible to make these types of correspondences between Ki-Kongo and ancient Egyptian if it were not, if they were not related. You cannot do this with these words with any Semitic language. You're not going to find it. And so, as we can see here, these consonants that are represented by these graphemes, these symbols, correspond regularly to the same symbols in Ki-Kongo. So I have 4 examples here. We've established a pattern. So we have eyebrow, plume meaning feathers or hair, and hair in Ki-Kongo. In the Egyptian, salt water, water, langu, water. In Ma'au or Marahu, wood, board, plank, and then in Longwa, a tree yielding very good timber for planks, et cetera, et cetera. And so these are the types of correspondences that make them upset, which is why they do not like for us to come down there, because this threatens their sensibilities and their ability to argue that there's no connection with the Black folks, the Negroes that occupy the vast majority of the continent of Africa. And so, by comparing Ma'at to Ki-Kongo, we get a better sense of, first of all, probably how it was originally pronounced. For example, we have, we say Ma, but it's not Ma, it's Lunga, to be accurate, right, to be exact, perfect, etc. Or Ma'at, Lungu, justification, justice, righteousness, blamelessness, completeness, right? So it is on this grounding, by establishing this, that I was able to go back and redefine the aspect of Ma'at that was used as the cultural foundation and for the moral grounding. And I was able to establish that in Lunga or Ma'at really should be defined as the healing art of open-hearted sharing. Because there is also a Ma'at meaning to present, to offer, to share. And this is exactly what you see here. They're doing a play. So we have this pharaoh offering Ma'at, sharing. So when we're sharing with one another, this establishes a relationship, a bond, because we're breaking bread and everyone is fed. And then we can be about the business of business, right? And healthy interpersonal relationships. And so in another presentation, I will deal with Lunga as the word for balance and the like. But since we're dealing with Ma'at and in Ki-Kongo, you can say also Kaninga. It's the same word. It's just pronounced slightly different. It's a dialectical variation of the word. And Fukiao goes in deep on this Kotuswa Mu Bamuta or Kotuswa Mu Bukulu, which is ancestralization ritual that they do in the Ki-Kongo, where just like what you find in ancient Egypt, they have scales. There's still a kind of judgment going on. So I'll have a different video on that. But, it is something to keep in mind because we see this amongst the Baluba people as well. So this is the papyrus of Ani from the 19th dynasty. And here we can see Ani in front of Osiris. And then we have the double Ma'ati, the double judgment here. And we have, Anubis or Anpu dealing with the scales. And we have Jehuti here writing down the results. And here's Ma'at here in the form of the ostrich feather. And so what you're seeing here is the 42 assessors. And these are 42. These are what we call the declarations of innocence. So what Ani is doing in this image here is going before Ma'at and Osar and Anpu and Jehuti and I forgot what the monster's name here. And he's getting his heart weighed, his deeds weighed, and he's declaring to to everyone and these deities as well that I have not done these taboos in the society. So here's a few of them. So, I'll just read, for example, the ones that are in red. Hail, fire embracer who come from Keraha. I have not robbed. Hail, dangerous one who come forth from Rastaja. I have not killed men. Hail, double lion who came forth from the sky. I have not destroyed food supplies. Hail, green of flame who come forth from Memphis or Menefer. I have not taken food, right? So we see here, I have not robbed. I have not killed anyone. I have not destroyed food supplies. I have not taken food. Well, many of you should know that I have published a text called Muntu wa Nzambi, Portrait of Human as God's Special Creation, which was written by Dr. Chilemalema Mukinge. And, it details the Baluba, he's a Muluba, as we would say, their tradition, religion, and philosophy, and he juxtaposes it and compares it with other African traditions, across, including the ancient Egyptian. And then he goes on, and you can see that when someone is about to die, if it's not like death and accidental death, they're on their deathbed, they also declare their innocence to the family and to the community, right? And so this is what it says in Chiluba, for example, the first one, China Mushipa Muntu. I have not killed anyone. And then the next one, I have not denied food to anyone. I have not humiliated my elders. I have not stolen anyone's property. The same things that you would hear in ancient Egypt. And so why are these connections? So when you have in Central Africa this concept of Ma'at, and now you have, the judgment and the declaration of innocence, it brings a deeper, correlation in terms of not only just the words and the languages, but certain aspects of the philosophy and culture. But what's unique about the Central African Declaration of Innocence is not only the person who was about to die that says this, the people around him also do a declaration of innocence, because the Declaration of Innocence is supposed to, call out to the spirits and the ancestors in the community and let them know that I am not responsible for this person dying. So I have not killed anyone. I haven't denied people food. I have not humiliated my elders. I am innocent of doing harm to this person. So if I am not, I haven't placed a curse on him or her. I have not done any of those things. So I am innocent of this man, whose life may be ending soon, or this woman whose life may be ending soon. So it is very rich, and I encourage y'all to get the book. You can get it on Amazon, right? So now we're going to go to Yoruba land, and I have this big red arrow here, pointed at the Egyptian wasp scepter. And so normally when you spell wasp, it is this W and then this nasalized volar trill, which is actually an R, and then the S. And I'm showing here 3 columns: Egyptian dialect 1, Egyptian dialect 2, and the Yoruba, because this wasp is really Wesser, which has the syllables have been switched, right? So I'll let you, look at this. And for those of you who have my text on, Yoruba, Orisha, or Chiluba, Maweja, Yoruba, Orisha, and Ancient Egyptian Ak, a linguistic assessment or whatnot, exactly how I titled the book. But if you have that little blue book, this is in there. But you can see here, the correspondences, and I have it color coded, and how everything plays out here, right? And so, the wasp is a scepter, so we say ashe. The word for wasp, prosperity, fortune, prosperous, prosperity. I don't know why I have that on here twice. But, Ashe is the force to make all things happen and multiply. It also means authority, power, law, command. And Wasp or Wisser is powerful, strong, dominion, have dominion. You can see the relationships between these sounds and words. And so when they're trying to make these arguments that there's no connections, it's impossible to make that argument in a very scientific sense, because we can argue the patterns and they cannot. You cannot do this with Semitic, you cannot do this with Berber, right? And so you can see these Ashe scepters in West Africa, for example. So the image that you see here, these come from various different texts written by Dr. Abu Bakri Musalam, who is an Egyptologist out of Senegal. And, so this is an artifact of the Wa scepter coming from ancient Egypt on the left, A. And then in the center is from the Fulani, the pool of Senegal. And this C is from the Nanakana of Ghana. And so, in these are areas in which, those nomadic pastoralists have traveled in and out of ancient Egypt and brought this into West Africa. And so, so among the Yoruba, these staff will simply be called Ashe, right? And so when you go to the temple of Waset or you go to the city of Waset, you're really going to the temple or the city of Ashe. And, so this could be a name that we attach to our own independent educational systems, because that's what temples were. They were university schools. And so the reason why this is very important is because, when we're sticking with the Congo, it's not a coincidence that, we find these correspondences between Proto-Bantu and Chiluba and Ki-Kongo, and dealing with, the weighing of the heart and the declaration of innocence and the presence of Ma'at. Because, Kemet and the Congo, for example, are one and the same. The word Congo and the word Kemet are the same. And so you would say Chikongo or Kemet, right? And by the same logic, the same patterning, the same series of sound and meaning correspondences, which you can see here on the screen, this is how we know that the word Congo and Kemet are the same. And so it's not a coincidence that you would see these types of correspondences and others between ancient Egypt and modern Central Africa in terms of the Congo, because they derive from the same ancestral culture and language. And so it's not a surprise. So this is why, this is how, linguistics can be used to recover that memory and to properly orientate the discussion regarding ancient Egypt, its relationship, its emergence into history and the like within its proper African context. And so, there was a slight bonus, because this is a picture of one of the individuals who, was involved in the campaign to not let us enter Egypt and to not have the conference. And I forgot who this individual is, but he is also a part of that camp. And these are, news stations and the like, and these are allegedly professors or whatnot. And you can see the original flyer, even. So these are screenshots from this is just an image of him, but this is a screenshot from the actual video that was being shown. And I should put the links in the description. But pay attention, just like Zahi Hawass, of their skin tone and their hair type and texture. So when we say that the ancient Egyptians don't look like these people, they get upset. But they want to argue that the way that they look, are a representation of the ancient Egyptians. Like, these folks look like these folks. And it is a crying shame. And, this is the issue that we face. And this is why we say it is there's an intellectual war that has been waged on us, and there are many of us who are in the fight, who are making things happen, and we'll of course keep you all updated on it, on the progress of what we are doing. And so that essentially was my presentation. So I do appreciate each and every one of you for listening. And I think they're going to put together a video of the entire conference. So you can go to the hoppyfilm.com and, sign up for their newsletter, and they'll let you know when the official tape will be released. So that's all I have. So y'all enjoy y'all day. And until next time, peace.